Let's take a look at the workflow of a regular file and understand when we would sharpen during our workflow and how we could efficiently sharpen this image. So first of all, I sharpen at the very end of my workflow. And the reason I do this is because that sharpening is often dependent on output, and even more specifically, it's depending on if your file is printed on a matte paper or a semi-gloss or luster paper. Those surfaces have different textures and need different levels of sharpening. Matte paper doesn't need as much sharpening as a paper with texture like a luster paper or a semi-gloss paper. So what I normally do is come up to my layers and then go to flatten image, and then I flatten everything. I go to image size, and I resize my image for its output, and then I'm ready to sharpen my file. So because of this, I often have to do this if I'm doing an output, and I'll save that file as a print file that has already been sharpened after I do the procedure. So let's pick up where that workflow leaves off and imagine that we've flattened our layer, we've resized our image, now we're ready to sharpen for output. So I'm going to make a background copy of this image, and I could just rename this sharpening. I'm going to come up to my filter pull down menu and go to sharpen and then smart sharpen. So what I want to do is navigate to the primary element of this photograph. In this case, it is the eyes. And I also want to make sure that I'm at a view of 100%. That's because the pixels of my screen and the pixels of the photograph that I'm looking at are at a 1-to-1 ratio. Those two ratios of information are the same, and so I can actually see what's happening on the pixel level to my image. So that's very important to make sure, and the Smart Sharpen dialog box will automatically by default show you the image at 100%. Now the other thing about this dialog box is that you can hover into it, you can click and drag the image and drag up to your primary element. When you click and hold in the dialog box in that window, it shows you the before. When you let go, it shows you the after. And that will, the quickness of that reaction will depend on the RAM of your computer. If your computer is slowing down, it might take a while for the before and after to actually show up. So now I'm going to go over to my amount slider, and what I want to do is take a look at the primary element of this photograph, and here it's the eye, and I want to make sure that I turn that up until I start seeing the edges of this image to start to define, especially in the eyelashes, especially along the wrinkles of the eye over here. And then I'm also using my radius slider, and the radius tells the algorithm how many pixels away from the contour to add contrast to. So if I have a radius of 13, you can see that it's adding contrast to 13 pixels around the contour of what it finds in terms of the algorithm. And so that creates that unwanted halo effect that we don't really need in the image. Even at a pixel radius of 5 or 5.6 here, this is undesirable because the image looks crunchy. and too much contrast is added locally through that higher radius. So depending on the resolution of your image, that pixel radius can get higher, but normally with the resolutions that we typically work with, a 2 pixel radius is something that I usually use as a cutoff point. I wouldn't go anywhere higher than a 2 pixel radius with the resolutions that we're normally working with our cameras. So now I'm ready to fine tune this. Going back and forth, I think I got a pretty good level of sharpening in this image. And to pay attention to the third slider is the reduce noise slider. And basically we are adding noise locally to this image by sharpening it. And this slider is kind of contradicting and counteracting what we're doing with those other 2 sliders. So if you find that this might help, I wouldn't go above 20% with this because it would actually just make your image soft like it is here at 100%. So nothing above 20% for this. And now I'm ready to press OK and apply that sharpening to this image. And there we have it. I'm going to hit Command 1 to see my image at 100%. And here's the before, turning off the visibility of that sharpening layer. And here's the after.